To take a look at the revised 2020 budget and related issues, I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by an economist, Professor Uche Waleke. Thanks a lot, Prof, for joining us on the news at 10. Now, with all the disruptions that we saw in the economy, fantastic. With all the disruptions that we saw, are you actually surprised that we had that revision upwards?
I would describe the 2020 revised budget as a child of necessity. A child of necessity in the sense that by now we would have been 6 months into the implementation of the 2020 budget. Again, that brings me to commend the federal government efforts in at least restoring the budget cycle, to January, from January to December. It's just that COVID-19 is particularly affecting this one. So it's a child of necessity. In a period of recession, you wouldn't be reducing spending. If you want to stimulate the economy, if you want to avert a severe recession, as has been projected, your option, even what we know from theory, your option is to spend, and that is why we're having if you like, the high figure, 10.8 trillion budget for 2020. So for me, it's justified. It's just that, of course, there are consequences. What that means is that it's also ballooning the fiscal deficit, and that will also mean more borrowing. But in a situation like we find ourselves, one can, explain it. If you also look at the benchmarks, the assumptions that were used for it, I would also say that they're realistic. For one, we have not been a little ambitious, in a bid to close the fiscal deficit. The budget reference price is below $30 per barrel, and if you also look at the production cut in line with the agreement with OPEC, I understand what we have as our quota is 1.4 million barrels per day. And there is also an additional 300,000 condensates, which don't go into the figure. So if you take all that into consideration, you would agree with me that the 2020 budget has been based on realistic assumptions, including the medium-term expenditure framework, which the minister has told us is also ready, the 2021 to 2023. But the allocations, again, in my view, reflect the government priorities. If you look at the breakdown, works and housing is getting the largest chunk. Transport is also there, and of course power. So these ones are having the largest share in terms of capital expenditure.
All right, Prof. But if you
there's
look
also
at
agriculture.
Yeah, I can hear you. If you look at the timing, the president was talking about implementation, which is one thing we always talk about when we have the budget out. With the year half gone, if you look at it that way, how do you expect the budget to play out?
Also commend the president for coming out to say, for giving a matching order, if you like, to the Ministry of Finance, Budget and Planning, to ensure that ministry, departments and agencies get at least 50% of their capital allocation before the end of the month. So what that means is that if that happens, there's a likelihood, there's a possibility that before the end of the year, we'll be talking about a significant rate of implementation with respect to the capital component, which hasn't been the situation previously. So I think the emphasis on capital component of that budget, even though it's not where one would expect it to be, because it's less than what we have voted for debt service. Debt service is allocated 2.95 trillion, whereas capital component of the budget is 2.23. So you discover that a situation where you are spending more servicing debt than you are spending on capital, of course, is not ideal. But as I said earlier on, these are unusual times. But again, I have to say this. It's important, too, that we look critically at the recurrent side. If you look at the recurrent expenditure is about 4.95 trillion, close to 5 trillion. If you look at that recurrent spend, and you look at the portion that is service-wide votes, over 1 trillion, I am confident that, or I have reason to believe that some of the items there, can still be further reduced. One of them is contingency. You have contingency of 15 billion. That was the same thing that was provided for, in the 2019 budget. You also have items like, money we are paying for outsourcing services, 5 billion. And there is also one for international sporting events, 5 billion. International sporting events in a period of COVID-19, when we know that a number of these sporting events are not going to happen. So we should take a look at that section. That section has a lot of round figures. And with my training as an economist, as a chartered accountant, when you see figures that are completely round, so many of them, it puts you upon inquiry. So as I said earlier on, the recurrent side can be, one can further put a searchlight on that side with a view to, seeing how we can further cut it down. I also think what we have for defense, the recurrent spend for defense, what we are budgeting for recurrent for defense is also on the high side, over 780 billion naira. Again, we should take a critical look at that.
All right, thank you so much. Yes,
particularly, as I said earlier on, for service-wide votes. But in all, I think the government deserves a commendation, as I said earlier on, for ensuring that this is out and that implementation, kicks in immediately.
All right, Professor Uche Uwaleke, economist, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the News at 10 tonight as we crunch those numbers. Thank you.